Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Brief. Hong Kong is facing a severe disaster, a level 5 fire at Wang Fuk Court, Taipo, causing many casualties. Various sectors are helping. At a Ministry of National Defense press conference, a mainland media outlet asked if the Hong Kong garrison will help. Ministry spokesperson 姜斌expressed condolences for those who died and for firefighters lost in the Hong Kong fire. He also expressed condolences to victims' families and those affected and extended sympathies. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Hong Kong garrison will act according to orders and fulfill its duty to safeguard Hong Kong. Let's also pay attention to the tense situation between China and Japan. After Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi said Japan might not have the capacity to intervene in the Taiwan Strait, it sparked an uproar. Japanese media report that personnel in Japan's self-defense forces said if the Fujian aircraft carrier takes military action in Taiwan, Japan and the US can track the Fujian. In response, the spokesperson said that regarding such remarks, there is only one thing to say: it's pure fantasy and overestimating one's own abilities. Looking back at the diplomatic tug-of-war between China and Japan on the evening of November 24th, at the initiative of the United States, the Chinese and American leaders had a phone call, and not long after, US President Trump proactively requested a call with the Japanese side. On November 26, according to sources cited by the Wall Street Journal, during the call, Trump warned Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, asking him not to provoke China over the Taiwan Strait issue. The report described that US President Trump sensed China's anger and demanded that Japan tone down its stance on the Taiwan Strait issue. Japanese officials said that this message was concerning. According to Japanese officials and a knowledgeable American source, Trump asked Sanai Takaichi to soften his rhetoric, but he did not pressure Sanai Takaichi to withdraw his statements. It was said that this was because Trump understood the domestic political constraints faced by Sanai Takaichi, knowing that she might not be able to fully retract her statements. According to sources, during the call between the Chinese and US leaders, both sides emphasized the issues they cared about most. The US side stressed trade and soybean orders, while the Chinese side's top concern was the Taiwan Strait issue, clearly stating China's principled position on the Taiwan issue, and emphasizing that Taiwan's return to China is an important part of the post-war international order. The Chinese side also mentioned that China and the US had previously stood firm in resisting fascism and militarism, and that now, more than ever, both sides should work together to safeguard the achievements of the victory in World War II. When asked about the content of the call between Trump and Sanai Takaichi, the White House reiterated Trump's previous statements, while the Japanese Prime Minister's office refused to comment. The Wall Street Journal reported that this incident highlights the new reality in US-China relations. Analysts say that the order of Trump's calls, China first, then Japan, may reflect Trump's intention to restrain allies in key positions. The controversial political stance serves the US-China trade relationship. Japanese officials said that this information is concerning because it suggests that Trump does not want the Taiwan Strait issue to affect the easing of US-China trade relations. The report also mentioned that during the first parliamentary discussion with the leaders of 4 opposition parties on the 26th, Sanai Takaichi did not intend to mention any specific scenarios regarding the Taiwan Strait issue. Some analysts believe this is a soft message from Sanai Takaichi. In addition, according to a report by Kyodo News, after the party leaders' discussion, former Japanese Prime Minister and Constitutional Democratic Party leader Yoshihiko Noda told the media that since Sanai Takaichi no longer mentions specific examples, he believes this is, in effect, a retraction of her previous statements. Goodman, a former Asia Affairs expert in the Obama administration and now a geopolitical research expert at the Council on Foreign Relations, said, "It's not surprising that US President Trump has phone calls with China and Japanese leaders, but the order of these calls is quite interesting and may have drawn some attention in Tokyo. Japan's provocations regarding the Taiwan issue have led to a strong countermeasure from China, and the silence and apparent admonition from its key ally, the United States, have put Japan in an even more awkward position." According to a report on November 25th, after Sanai Takaichi made remarks about Taiwan on November 7th and refused to retract them, she has faced fierce criticism from the international community, including China, for several consecutive days. Meanwhile, Trump has yet to make any public comment on this incident. Analysts believe that this kind of silence has caused concern among some Japanese officials. At this point, the phone call between the US and Japanese leaders is the first since a major diplomatic dispute broke out between China and Japan. On November 27th, Yuan Tantian, a social media platform under CCTV News, published an article saying that during the call between Chinese and US leaders, the Chinese side mentioned that China and the US once fought together against fascism and militarism and now should jointly safeguard the achievements of World War II. Yuan Tantian noted this is the first time in nearly 10 years that militarism has been directly mentioned in exchanges between the leaders, and this word has a specific target. During this call, the US side publicly stated that they understand the importance of the Taiwan issue to China. Huang Shan, a distinguished professor at Shanghai International Studies University, also believes that this round of consecutive phone calls between the Chinese and US leaders and the US and Japanese leaders sends out three signals: eliminating interference in China-US relations, using the Taiwan issue to warn Japan, and demonstrating the tacit understanding between China and the US in major power diplomacy. Dan Zhigang, a researcher at the Northeast Asia Research Institute of the Heilongjiang Academy of Social Sciences and chief expert at the Northeast Asia Strategic Research Institute, pointed out in an interview with the Mainland Observer Network that while the US values its alliance with Japan, it also does not want Japan to disrupt the current positive momentum in China-US interactions. This is especially relevant with reports that a visit is scheduled for April next year. At this juncture, Trump is very likely to warn the Japanese side not to create unnecessary complications. Japan's response to the Wall Street Journal report is also worth noting. At the regular press conference held in the morning, Chief Cabinet Secretary Motonobu first repeated the content of the press release previously issued by Japan, and then said that, apart from that, the specific details of the conversation fall under diplomatic exchanges and would not be commented on. However, at the afternoon's regular press conference, Kihara changed his tone and directly stated that, as mentioned in the Wall Street Journal report, Sane Takaichi had received a warning from Trump regarding the issue of Taiwan's sovereignty. The suggestion not to provoke China is not true. He also said that they had already lodged a protest with the American media outlet that published this news, namely the Wall Street Journal. When asked why there were two different responses given on the same day, Motonobu explained that given the large number of inquiries the government had received, they determined it was necessary to clarify the matter. Earlier that day, Kyodo News reported that sources within the Japanese government revealed that the leaders of Japan and the United States had indeed discussed this during their phone call. They discussed the current deterioration of China-Japan relations and mentioned that cooperation is needed to de-escalate the situation. In response to the Wall Street Journal's report, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun said that the phone call between the US and Japanese leaders is a matter between the United States and Japan, and China has no comment. He emphasized that the Taiwan issue is China's internal affair and does not allow any external interference. As for the Japanese media reports, opposition party leader Sanae Takaichi made remarks during a discussion with other opposition party leaders. When commenting, Takaichi no longer mentioned specific examples, which in effect is a retraction of her previous statements. Has China accepted this? Guo Jiakun reiterated that Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's erroneous remarks are serious, violate the spirit of the four China-Japan political documents, undermine the political foundation of China-Japan relations, and have aroused strong indignation among the Chinese people. Guo Jiakun emphasized that not mentioning the remarks anymore and actually retracting the erroneous statements are two different things. The Japanese side is deluding itself if it thinks that simply not bringing up the issue again is enough. Trying to cover up Sanae Takaichi's serious, erroneous remarks is just self-deception and talking to oneself. China absolutely does not accept this. To briefly summarize a few observations, first, after provoking China, Japan has fallen into a strategically passive position. Sanae Takaichi's radical statements have made Japan a troublemaker that increases regional tensions. More crucially, Japan's key ally, the United States, has not publicly supported Japan. US President Trump prioritized a phone call with China's leader. The US admonished Sanae Takaichi, urging her to tone down her rhetoric, showing it does not want Japan's provocative actions to affect the US-China relationship, which is now focused on economic priorities and easing tensions. China and the US have shown tacit understanding in crisis management, prioritizing risk control. The US called China's leader first, then spoke with Japan, with both sides intentionally excluding Japanese interference to prevent escalation. This shows China and the US are directly communicating and managing each other's core issues. Third, under domestic and diplomatic pressure, Sanae Takaichi recently told Parliament she had no intention of mentioning specific scenarios. The opposition saw this as a retraction. This shows Takaichi's statements are under domestic pressure and she is trying to soften her stance through technicalities. However, China has already clearly rejected this, an ambiguous approach, by simply not mentioning it further. It can be said that this has completely blocked Japan's attempt to quietly move past the issue, and the Japanese government's inconsistent and confused responses to American media reports further highlight their bewilderment in the face of this predicament. Ultimately, what this incident reveals in terms of strategic trends is that, when handling China-US relations, America's strategic priority is the China-US relationship first, followed by the US-Japan alliance. The US will restrain its allies' geopolitical actions in order to maintain its bilateral relationship with China, especially in the area of economic and trade relations. For Japanese right-wing politicians, attempting to use the aggressive Taiwan card to contain China will not only provoke a strong countermeasure from China, but may also not receive support from their main ally, the United States, thus posing significant strategic risks. In summary, the contest between China and the US will not stop, but for now, a balance has been found, which has given China some room in its diplomatic strategy. This allows China to manage the provocative actions of right-wing politicians like those in Japan